Happy Friday. Welcome to the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast, episode number 99. We hope you're doing great. My name's Nick, your host, and if you looked at the program description today and thought, who is Brian Pocrass? I'm going to tell you in just a minute, and I'm going to also tell you why you should stay listening. You can follow us on social media. We'd love to have you. We're on Twitter at Fancounters Live. You can also go to our Facebook group, which if you search Fancounters on Facebook, you'll find the big group. If you search Sharpie Nation, you'll find our intimate small group where you can chat about our episodes, give us some suggestions and feedback, and join other fans of the show. And finally, if you want a guest on the show, like if you thought this would be a perfect guest for you, you should interview this person. Any celebrity you can think of, send it to us at hello@fancounters.com. And if we get that person on the show, we'll bring you on the show and allow you to ask some questions too. Now, this week we've got Brian Pocrass, and I know you're like, who is that? Well, Brian has been around child stars ever since he was a child. So if you grew up in the 90s or the 2000s, he's going to reference a lot of names that you've probably heard of. We're going to talk a little bit about Punky Brewster. I've heard little rumors that show is coming back. I sure hope it does. We're going to dive into that. Brian also is the one who puts together those very famous photo shoots, recreating movie posters of movies of the past, like Little Rascals, Problem Child. You might have seen his one from Hook or School of Rock. He does these reunions and recreates the movie posters of what they look like now. It's very awesome work. And then also, he's got a new thing that he's doing on his YouTube channel. They're called film crawls. And he's got an amazing one of the Home Alone movie locations. And he also has a great story about tracking down that infamous tree from the Macaulay Culkin movie, My Girl. This show is filled with a lot of stories you've never heard anywhere else, and we're going to get going with Brian right now.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fancounters with Nick and Elizabeth on the Podfix Network.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours.
If I'm having dinner with my wife, don't sit down at my table. Don't follow me into the bathroom.
Can I take a picture? We're gonna. Oh my God!
I think this guy wants to fight me. Ended up being a fan.
I'm the only one that's ever been on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
Well, guess what? I have a big surprise for you.
That's why we call it Fancounters.
I don't think you're going to last on the air very long.
Brian Pocrass, welcome to Fancounters. Thanks for joining us this week. How are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Now, you were a last-minute fill-in because I had a guest to postpone, which they'll hear in a week or two. But I want to thank you for being here last minute and joining me to share some of your stories, which, by the looks of what you sent me, you've got some good stuff coming up.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. Happy to step in here, and always fun to share some stories, especially since your podcast is one I listen to a lot, and always just happy to help out and contribute.
Well, thank you. And you have contributed because he's given us some guests before, so we do appreciate it. Now,
yeah, no problem.
You grew up in Los Angeles, I would assume, right?
Yeah. I'm kind of one of the few like rare Angelinos here who's actually born and raised. Most people who live here are transplants.
Yep, they've all moved from somewhere else. It was funny when you sent me some of the stuff that you had done. You're like, I don't know if you remember this show called Funhouse. And I was like, oh my gosh, I grew up watching that show. And I couldn't tell you how many episodes there were, but I can tell you they did a celebrity version. And I had a huge crush at the time on Candace Cameron, and she was on that show. So, of course, I probably watched you when you were on that show.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's really funny. With Funhouse, I remember my, of course, lifelong dream as a kid, I wanted to be on Double Dare. And usually everything films here in Los Angeles, but for some reason, Double Dare filmed in Florida.
Yep.
So, yeah, so like all of a sudden, we kind of, I think it was back in the day when there was a classified ad section of the LA Times, and I think my parents were going through it, and they saw like that's before Craigslist, and before they would put out notices, they would just kind of put out little things in the classified ad section, and it said I remember it said Double Dare-esque type game show. So she just kind of brought that into the room with me and put it on my dresser, and I was like, I'm game if I can do this.
I can't believe they put a casting call like that in a newspaper. That's so weird.
Yeah, no, it's just, 'cause I remember like for the audition process, it's like I had to I was 11 years old at the time, and I had to kind of pick a partner, so you had to go in with a girl. And I remember I strategically tried to see who was the most athletic girl in my grade.
Okay.
And so I picked this one girl who was a great athlete, and she auditioned with me, and we auditioned, and then got a call about a few weeks later that I've made the show. And I think I kind of told you there was a little something weird with my episode.
Yeah, there was 2 Brians on that show, so you were asked to change your name.
Yeah, exactly. They called me and they said they kind of basically were saying, hey, we want you on the show, but only if you change your name or you go by a middle name or a nickname. And, if you want to go by your first name, we can put you back in the pool and possibly give you a call later. And I was just, at the time, I remember thinking, I can care less what they call me.
Right, exactly. If I can win some cash and prizes, I'm all over it.
Yeah, call me whatever you want. I mean, I remember just not really wondering why they couldn't have 2 Brians, like it really mattered. I think maybe if we buzzed in for a question and they said Brian and we would both answer or
right.
something. So my nickname at the time was Pokey, kind of like from my last name, and I said, can I go on as Pokey? And then I remember they responded, well, if you don't mind going on as that.
Right.
Yeah, so so lo and behold, we went on the show, and what really threw me off when we got there is that our opponents were both 13 years old, and we were both 11. And I mean, I know that may not seem like a big deal, but back then, we were talking 6th grade against 8th grade.
Right. There's
and
a physical
I was just
size
thinking,
difference.
Oh my God, we're going to get totally killed.
But that didn't happen.
No, it didn't happen at all. We got really lucky. Not lucky. I mean, I guess we completely annihilated them. I mean, it's fun it's on YouTube actually, that episode, and we basically before we got to the race, I think we were up 180 to nothing or something, and and so it was definitely a highlight of my childhood.
It would be for mine too. Now, did you actually? I don't think I got to the end today. Did you win stuff?
We got to run through the fun house, and I believe, I don't remember, I think I got a karaoke machine and a basketball backboard and $300. I remember they had a thing called the Power Prize, where it's they would hide a trip or something. There was always one big prize that they would hide behind one of the tags. And I'm not sure how much you remember from the ending. It was a thing where you would basically have 2 minutes to run through this fun house where they had all these tags with either prizes or cash, and you can only grab 3 at a time and then come back and tag your partner, and basically you can grab as many as you can in that tag team effect for 2 minutes. And they would hide the Power Prize behind one of the tickets, and that means if you got that, it would make all the sirens would go off and you'd win the prize. We did not win that.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's kind of an anticlimactic story, but I was just trying to point out that we didn't win that. But it was some trip to New England or something. But I was just happy I got my basketball backboard.
So did your mom and dad have to pay taxes on your winnings then?
Yes, they did have to pay taxes on the prizes.
Okay.
So I think that happens a lot with a lot of game shows. It's kind of like if you win something, other than cash, cash, they'll just take some of the money off that. But when it comes to prizes, you actually have to pay the tax to get those prizes. But now, I guess, paying, $1,000 for a $10,000 or $20,000 car is worth it. But it's just, you kind of figure if you win something, you shouldn't have to pay for it.
One of your first challenges on that whole game was that basically everybody but you got slimed multiple times. And when they come back from the commercial break, you're cleaned up and brand new again. So just behind the scenes of a show that with slimings and stuff like that, did they send you to the showers to get cleaned up, or? To
be honest, since I didn't get slimed, I didn't get cleaned or anything, but it was a thing called the slop machine, where you basically, there were 4 little spots and you kind of picked your seat, and then they did 3 pulls, and either slop or candy came down. And I just got lucky because the one seat that I picked on the 3 pulls got candy all 3 times.
Yeah.
And everyone else got completely slopped. And the funny thing that I remember from that is that in the middle of it, I think it was the person next to me, it basically shut down in the middle. So nothing was coming down, so they had to halt production, and the 3 of them were sitting there shivering.
Oh,
so I guess
wow.
that stuff that came down was this kind of goo slop that was just caking them. And people kept coming by and wiping their face off, so you can kind of see at different times their face is very, very clear. You can tell someone had wiped their face a little bit. But I think they did clean them up afterwards, and it was all water-based. So
oh, okay.
So it really wasn't hard to change because I think, if I remember correctly, we all had to have bathing suits underneath our uniforms.
Okay.
So I think there was a thing where they went into the pool right after that, and so it was a really easy. You're a kid; it's really easy to change. So I don't think it didn't halt production too much to clean them up.
Mostly all fun.
Yeah, and I remember it was M&Ms that came down on my head.
So if you want to relive this is on Brian's YouTube channel called Brian the Film Crawler, and you can look that up there. But there's some other neat videos that you have on as well, and I want to get into these right now. I wish I had known you 5 years ago because I know you listen to the show, so you know that I'm a big School of Rock fan, and you were one of the people that got the band back together from the movie with Jack Black and Miranda Cosgrove, and apparently there's a concert because there's footage on your YouTube channel of this reunion. So tell me a little bit about getting people back together like the cast of School of Rock from the movie and what you do.
Okay, sure. Well, the School of Rock one was one of my favorite reunions that we got to put together. But how it all kind of started was growing up in Los Angeles, I happened to grow up with a lot of former child actors. And probably about 7 or 8 years ago, maybe right when kind of Facebook was getting big and Twitter was starting to come out, and I guess, pop culture started getting really hot, especially stuff from the 80s and 90s. And all these outlets were putting out these Where Are They Now profiles and galleries, and for certain movies like just anything from the 80s or 90s, The Sandlot, and they'd kind of resurface every few months or a year. And a friend of mine who was a former child actress who was in Problem Child 2 and Parenthood, her name's Ivy Ann Schwan, okay. And she acted a lot when she was younger. Now she's not acting anymore, and she lives a happy married life up in Seattle, and she just really has stayed off the grid entertainment-wise for the last probably 15 years or so. And every time there'd be some article put out there about the cast of Problem Child 2 today, they would kind of find some old, outdated photo of her from probably 10 years prior from her old MySpace page, and then kind of give some cockamamie thing about what she's doing, which is something she's not doing at all. I think it says she's embarking on a music career or something just really bizarre. And it just kind of got annoying because she didn't really like how that was out there, but also was kind of intimidated to really step out and just kind of embark with the back and forth banter of the internet. So we kind of had this idea of putting together this reunion for the film Problem Child, and also pretty much just kind of giving the actors their own narrative, kind of giving them an opportunity to have a good photo shoot and get these kind of real photos out there, what they look like today. And then if they want to just kind of go back to their world, it's at least if anyone does these galleries, they'll just pull that photo. So it's kind of just, like I said, a way of giving them their own narrative and way of controlling this crazy internet that we have.
These pictures are adorable of Problem Child. You've got them sitting on the wash machine just like they were in the movie poster, but as they look today, it's amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it was fun because I was doing the recreation photos was something that came later. It's we got them together and we filmed just a normal interview with them. And I doubled up for Ivy Ann, so I did one for Parenthood and Problem Child.
Okay.
She was in both those films. And then I got this idea, after the Parenthood thing launched and it did really well, I kind of got this idea to bring them back together and do this kind of throwback photo shoot where we can I hired a stylist who's a good friend of mine, and she pretty much dressed them in similar outfits, not what they wore when they were 8, but just kind of similar ones, so we can try to recreate some shots. And I just was thinking it would be kind of a fun side-by-side gallery. And it was so much fun to be able to do that. And we also tied in kind of a John Ritter Foundation charitable aspect to that project, which at least made it really poignant and kind of a good time for them to get together. And because the big thing is John Ritter met his wife Amy Yazbek on those films.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so it was kind of a real special thing for them, and as well as being able to kind of do this for John, who had passed away, I think maybe 7 years prior to the project, or sometime along that line.
Yeah, that was early 2001 is when he died.
Yeah.
So
around that time. I remember it was on September 11th. So it might have been a couple years after that, maybe like 03 or 04.
Oh, maybe it
like
was. You're right. I remember it did have a September 11th tie-in, and that's probably why I was putting the 01 to it. But you're correct. It was.
Yeah, I mean, of course, all these weird little facts, which kind of suck for that family, because that he died on September 11th, which was also his daughter's 5th birthday.
Oh,
so it's like, I mean, really sometimes, what are the odds for that? Well, I guess one out of 365.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's kind of how that started, and then I kind of, since that did really well, I decided to try to do it for as many films as I can, and a lot of these are all self-funded. So I kind of, at the beginning was just trying to do it myself, and if I can find a collaborator, that'd be fun. But as long as it was done a certain way, because I was real protective of the actors, because it was just, if it became one of those weird media frenzy things, it's not going to be. It's kind of like I try to get the ones who don't do those typical interviews all the time.
Yeah, your work has been featured on almost every major show, TMZ, Entertainment Tonight, E! Online. Everybody's picked this stuff up. And if you go to 22vision.com, you can see the reunion photos from Problem Child, Parenthood. We talked about School of Rock, Little Rascals, and Hook. You did one for as well.
Yeah, probably the Little Rascals was the one I got the most press for. Like, that one was just a real special film because we were doing it for the 20th anniversary. And the thing that kind of jumped out at me is that at the time there hadn't been anything done on that film. Like, there was no special edition DVD, so it's like there was never really any interviews with any of those cast members who were now like in their mid-20s, and so, or like mid to late 20s, and they had never been together genuinely. So I kind of went on a big little search where it's usually kind of a snowball effect. I'll kind of reach out to one or two, and then we try to bring them all together. And there was one holdout when I was doing that one that I basically had said, if I can't get this person, I'm not going to do it.
Wow.
And
that's
and that was
no
the girl
pressure.
who played Darla.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there was nothing with her at all. That it's not like she didn't want to do it. It was more just that she was kind of like my friend, off the grid and not acting anymore, and just off kind of an email that I sent. I guess it just sounded a little funny to her,
Okay.
like, what do you mean we're going to do a throwback photo shoot? It was very intimidating, I guess, just the verbiage of ask, because they think they're probably going to get back into their outfits, and but it's done in kind of a good spirit and fun way.
This photo is so well done, and I have to say this: the little boy in the glasses, who is now grown up, looks almost identical. I mean, he didn't change at all.
Yeah, no, a lot of them. I mean, that guy you might remember from Full House. I believe he played one of Michelle's friends. His name is Blake McIver Ewing.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you're self-funding this, though. So, besides the press that you got out of these things, are you getting something out of this? I mean, how are you recouping your costs? Everything these days has to have that return on investment. Did this have that?
It's a little challenging on these little projects because they're kind of like pet projects for myself as I'm trying to, when I was trying to grow the brand and to get them out there, because there was that kind of catch-22 thing where I was selling it to the actors that, we're not exploiting you, and, that I know the way to kind of make money is if you get like sponsors, and they're going to want to exploit them. Like, they're going to want to do screenings, they're going to want to do conventions, and a lot of these people don't want to do that. So so I was always real careful to make sure that it didn't ever turn into that. And a lot of the money was recouped on YouTube video views. That kind of was a big one there. And they actually have made the money back, which was nice. I mean, I'm not a billionaire, but it's like, at least they do. Everyone I've done, I've at least made my money back with a little bit of profit here and there, because they just kind of live online, and also we kind of would do a lot of charitable aspects too. I would have them sign posters, but that money I wouldn't keep. I would usually donate that, but at least that was a way that income was coming in and then going back out to something helpful.
Because Little Rascals, there's 9 of them, and I'm sure that they all live everywhere, right? So, you're flying everybody to a central location. You're putting them up in a hotel. This is expensive, right?
Oh, yeah. Some of them can get kind of pricey. On that one, luckily there were half of them were Los Angeles-based.
Okay.
And there were a few that I used some of my own personal miles and my hotel points and such. And so I made it work. And luckily I had a lot of really talented friends who took discounts to work on this project. I had the guy who does the photoshopping for the for the photos, is a really successful editor for a major streaming network, and he helped out for a nice little price because he loved the movie so much.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was really a kind of a fun little collaborative thing right there, and I could get into the School of Rock one if you want to hear that one, because that one definitely has the fun stories.
Well, I would, because that one, it looks like this happened in Austin, Texas, and it looks like, obviously there's a concert behind it, so yeah, I mean, to get Jack Black to come and all of that, tell me.
Yeah, well, that one was a collaboration. So that one, we did it with the Austin Film Society, which is Richard Linklater's organization, and he was the director of the film. And so when it came for the 10th anniversary, I was separately speaking with all the kids, because I thought that this would be a really fun opportunity, because for this particular film, these actors could actually play. I mean, they were cast in the movie because they were really talented musicians. So I was just kind of thinking, like, it would be really cool to have them come together and actually do a concert. Like, that was just something that would have been, because they can perform and do really well. And so at least when I was talking with them, is they wanted to do a screening, and it kind of just evolved into this big event. And so, so basically I was kind of in charge of the talent going into it, and they were doing a lot of the logistics for the screenings. And then the concert was sponsored by Gibson, which was at their studio in Austin. So everything really worked out. I mean, they did a wonderful job in putting together the venues, and I'm from Los Angeles, I don't really know a lot of the Austin venues too well.
Right.
But the kind of fun dynamic that I had going into this was this movie was kind of interesting in the fact that you had about 13 kids, and they did this film, and then after the movie, there was one cast member that kind of went on to become really famous within that world.
Of the kids, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that would be Miranda Cosgrove, because she went on to do iCarly and I believe Drake and Josh, and became a pretty big bona fide star in that world. And the other kids, I mean, they did a lot of stuff. They're very talented, smart individuals, but I think School of Rock was probably the biggest project that they did. So it was a kind of an interesting thing for me to see when they all got together for the first time, what it was going to be like towards Miranda, or how she was going to, because when, the last time they saw each other all together, they were all kind of equal newcomers. And now you had this one who became this big star.
Yeah.
So that was kind of and also when I was talking to everybody, I was communicating with everybody personally except Miranda. Just because, the sake of, they were, the Austin Film Society kind of handled getting Jack Black and Miranda, because they were dealing more with their people.
Okay.
Kind of like with the agents and the managers and the publicists. And so I, of course, was, walked into there thinking that probably Miranda was going to be a little snot. Or, that was kind of my little thought at the time, like thinking, oh, God, we're going to have to deal with this, like, little
drama
prima
queen.
donna
Yep.
going into this. But the one thing that really jumped out at me is when we got to the airport, Miranda was on the flight that kind of like right after me. And when we were meeting everyone at the airport, I saw she walked up and her luggage came, and she got her own luggage. And I know that sounds something really stupid, but like to me, I was thinking like, this is a normal girl.
Yeah.
Like,
She doesn't have a handler or somebody that she had to pay to get her stuff. And
yeah, exactly. And like that was kind of the moment when I realized that she's probably going to be really cool. And she was a very lovely person, and just absolutely no attitude. If anything, very quiet and shy, and like possibly a little insecure in general, like anyone probably is.
Mm-hmm.
And just she was just a very lovely person to work with, and it's nice when you get the good stories, because most of the stories are pretty bad. And I just was really happy with how she interacted with everyone, and it was kind of as if time never went by.
And Jack Black seems to be very down to earth. When I talked to the kids who got to meet him as part of the musical tour, he spent tons of time with these guys. I would assume that he was just as excited to see these kids all these years later. Yeah,
definitely. He's and I heard, of course, all the stories from them, which I captured on my videos, where they were talking about what it was like working with him. And he's just like you'd imagine. I mean, probably out of all my reunions, this was the one where every single person there was great. I mean, just like the collective group, even their mothers, because a lot of their stage moms came, but this group here of mothers were just so kind and not those typical obnoxious stage moms. They were really cool, and I'm still friends with a bunch of them on Facebook, and it was just such a pleasant experience all around. And Jack was, just wonderful to work with. And the thing that was so amazing to me is I went to the rehearsal. They rehearsed that afternoon, and that's it. So if you watch any of those videos online, this was probably 3 hours of rehearsal, and that was it. It's like they didn't just do their one song from the film. They did about a set of maybe 8 or 9 songs, just like some classic rock songs, and these guys have never rehearsed with one another, so since they were 12 or 13, and it was just like really amazing how they were able to kind of come back. I mean, I was always thinking they could definitely tour.
They should have. They could have. Yeah, I mean, they probably could have piggybacked off of that appearance, but.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably going to be something maybe for they just had their 15th this year, but nothing was done, or actually I think it was last year. But maybe when the 20th rolls around, it might be another time to pick this up. Just, Jack is so busy, and obviously you can't tour without him. So.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, so that was definitely one of my favorite ones.
Well, some of your other videos that have gotten a lot of attention are the Where Are You Now videos. And one in particular caught my eye. I watched the Punky Brewster cast. Didn't you hear the same thing that I heard, that Punky Brewster was going to come back to television?
Yeah, no, I heard that online, like that there's a possible reboot in the works here. I've actually got a story with that Punky Brewster one. I mean, it may just look like it's just a video, but it was an actual reunion I was looking to do. And at the time, the one who played Henry, George Gaines, was still alive.
Okay.
He was 96 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I was that photo that you see in that video was my personal photo that I took of him, because I had the opportunity to go up to Santa Barbara to meet him.
Wow.
Because he was doing really well, but he just was retired and kind of didn't really feel comfortable being on camera or doing a full reunion with everyone. I mean, his mind was very much there, but maybe not 1,000%.
Okay.
So it's like, but I went up there and got to have like a little lunch with him and his wife was like 90 at the time, and it was just a real pleasant experience to kind of to meet with him, and just one little story that kind of irked me a little bit, and it's I guess it's kind of the juicy stuff for a podcast, but when I was talking to him, he kind of said like, "Oh, is Soleil here?" And I said, "Oh no, it's just me." And then she's like, "Oh well, if Soleil ever wants to come up to see me, I'd love to see her." So of course I tried to reach out to her people, and I reached out basically seeing if she wanted to come visit him. And I'm not 100% sure if she got the message or if it was just maybe her people saying this to me. So I don't want to call her out in that way. But basically they said she's not interested.
Wow.
And I was just at the time thinking seriously? I mean, I don't have to record it, but I mean I'll be happy to kind of give you his info for you to visit on your own. If anything, even it would be good for social media or whatever.
Right. A nice reunion moment. Jeez.
Yeah, and I remember saying to my business partner at the time, I was like, I bet you anything when he dies, she's gonna post some big thing about oh, rest in peace, all that kind of stuff. And of course she did. And I was thinking, oh, okay, yeah, you didn't want to see him. Could have just been her people making that decision without even running it by her, because I know that happens sometimes.
Oh, Brian, we run into that all the time. And we found out about it once because we had a guest who knew somebody that had turned us down, and they didn't even know that we had the invitation out there. So, yeah, that kind of stuff has to happen all the time.
Yeah, well, the funny thing that I always tell people when it comes to my reunions that I've done, and I kid you not with these stats, when I've been able to reach out to the person directly, my success rate of them participating is about 90%. When I reach out, when I am forced to do it through their people,
mm-hmm.
my success rate is about 2%.
Wow.
I mean, it's just kind of because one of those things where I don't even know how many times they even go back to the talent to tell them, but I just always kind of know off the bat that when I go to their publicist or their manager, it's going to sound like, one of those stupid projects to them. They're probably instructed if you're calling Anna Klumsky, like, if anyone calls about my girl, just say no. Like, so it's just kind of like one of those things where I just kind of, sit here and I have to draft it for my publicist to reach out to them to, like, my letter that I draft, and it goes out to them, and then I'm just like always thinking this is a waste of time.
Yeah. Well, we find that too. I mean, that's how it's really hard to get guests when we're constantly going through everybody's people. So,
yeah, and it really gets challenging. But I guess maybe the more you do it, the more you got to keep plugging, because for every 99 you don't get, you're going to get that one, and that makes it all worth it.
What was the best George Gaines story that he gave you? I'm looking at this picture right now of you at lunch. And he looks really good for the 90s.
For 96 or 97, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, he looked pretty much the same, and the cool thing for me is, like, when he talked, he had that same voice. He still had that punky. But yes, I mean, to be honest, he didn't share a lot of stories. I mean, I just thought it was one little funny moment. I mean, it's probably not funny, but I was sitting there at the table with them, and I was saying I wanted to talk about the Punky Brewster cartoon. And I was like, oh, it was really cool. Like, when you guys did the cartoon and you guys actually did the voices for it. It was like one of those Saturday morning Channel 4 cartoons where they just kind of like animated the show, and the real cast members did the voices. And I said, like, oh, was it fun doing the voices for that? And then he said, I didn't do the voice for it. And then the wife was like, that's right, you didn't do the voice for it. And then I'm sitting there and thinking, I know you did the voice for it. It's like, they're all saying you didn't do it. And I'm all like, how come no one remembers this? And it was like, and I'm sitting here talking about it.
So, but anyway, they really did. You weren't mistaken. He was.
Yeah. I mean, listen, he's 96 and she was 90. I'm not saying that there was anything wrong with not remembering doing that, but it was just kind of one of those funny moments when I'm like trying to talk about something and they're kind of like arguing that they never did that, and it's like, I know you did it.
Well, that's what I mean. It kind of makes you doubt yourself. Like, did I get that wrong? You like go home and you're like, I didn't get that wrong.
Yeah, and then I got in my car later. I looked on my iPhone and I was like, oh, there it is. He did the voice. Oh well, God bless him.
That's
he was
all right.
a nice guy. I didn't say this with a smile on my face. I mean, I'm not actually angry at the guy.
No. George Gaines, Punky Brewster, Police Academy. I mean, he's still a legend for all of those movies. I mean, he'll be remembered for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think with him, I mean, I think with that he enjoyed doing Punky Brewster, but I think that it was he did, because he was a pretty trained actor and he was a little older at the time, and I think he didn't really bond a lot with the kids, because to him, I remember him saying something that this was a paycheck job. Like, this was kind of one that he got that he was happy. It was a nice paycheck. Mm-hmm. But it's like he would kind of just go there, do his job, and then go home. And I think when you're dealing with a show like that had a lot of minors in it, and their parents were there, and so it was kind of a lot of parents and little kids, and I think from what I gather, he kind of just did his role and left.
Right. I would too, probably, because he was probably 50. When he did that
it's funny because he seemed like he was old then.
Yeah, he did. He did. He seemed like he was 60 or 70 then. So yeah, but
and they made him out to be like so old, and I think he was only like maybe 60 or late 50s. He just, I guess, back in the 80s, you were old, kind of like Mr. Drummond. Like, was not even that old on Different Strokes, but you just thought of him as like this old man.
Right. Well, especially when you're a kid, everybody's super old.
Even when you watch it now, it's like he looks a lot older than in his 40s or late 40s, early 50s. I guess that's kind of what the 80s used to do to you. And it's the fashion. Yeah,
and when you say that he didn't hang around the kids, it's kind of like, I think of right to my 7-year-olds who are almost close to the 9, 10, 11-year-old kids. They're not going to want to hang around their grandparents all that much to hang out and have fun. That's not that's not their idea of fun.
Yeah, and of course every show is going to have their dynamic. You have the Brady Bunch where the father, Robert Reed, really hung out with the kids a lot and wanted to have like a relationship with them and really bonded with them, where, then you have someone like George Gaines who this was just a paycheck. So it's not that he didn't care about the kids. It was more just he just looked at it as that and did his job and left, and just really wasn't one to bond.
Something else I found when I was looking you up is you had an interesting trip to Chicago, which is just to our south here, and you were very successful in finding the locations to Home Alone. You put together an awesome video. You must have spent hours editing this to make sure that you filmed it correctly. So tell me about why you came to Chicago looking for Home Alone. Tell me about the video.
Yeah, well, this is actually a new series that I'm working on now. That it's that I call film crawls, where I track down the filming locations of certain movies and kind of do a where are they now, but of the locations. So kind of treating locations as if they're people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of filmed in a type of road trippy scavenger hunt style. And so it's kind of just done very simple with just me and a friend who's the cameraman. And we kind of just edit it together where we blend kind of like the different kind of like what it looks like now into what it looked like then, and try to have a little bit of narration so it feels like the cast member or the viewer is coming along for this journey. And so I was trying to think which one I wanted to do first, and I was going to be going to Chicago to visit my cousin, and I thought that Home Alone would be a fun first one to try. And so I went there for about 2 days, and I don't know if you've visited the Home Alone house.
No, but I want to now because it's a very short trip away.
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, here's the thing. A lot of filming locations are done on sound stages and on studios, and so there's really not a lot of. There's only certain kind of things that are filmed on location. And what makes Home Alone unique is that it was a relatively low-budget film that people don't realize. And so it was all shot on location, with the exception of, I think, the scene in the attic, the basement, when it flooded. I mean, all the interiors of the house was filmed on John Hughes' little soundstage in Chicago. But everything was shot at that house on location in the front yard and the backyard.
That is so unusual. Yeah. And even when you told the story about how they dug in and created those steps to the basement, it's like, I would never have known that.
Do you want me to tell you how I know that?
Yes.
Because I mean, this is where it gets a little fun here. So because I get kind of obsessive when I start working on these projects where I want to just find out every little nook and cranny that I can possibly do. And so on this one trip, I went there and I filmed the house, and I think I posted a photo on my Facebook page of me and in front of the house, oh, here's the famous house. And a friend of mine private messaged me, and she's like, oh, my friend grew up in that house, and I used to have sleepovers there.
Oh my gosh.
And I was thinking, oh my God. Okay, so I email her, and I'm like, do you still talk to this friend? Do you think I can chat with her and kind of find out what it's like? And she's like, oh, sure. And she gave me her email address, and so I actually ended up going back to Chicago to film the second half of my video about a few months later. And while I was there, I had dinner with her. And she was the original house owner, or at least while they
owner
were
at the
filming,
time?
it was her mom, her dad, and her. So it was 3 people living in that house. And she was about 7 or 8 years old, kind of close to Macaulay's age while they were filming. And she just kind of, told me the whole story of during filming and all these fun things about what they did to the house and what they didn't do to the house. And they sold the house in 2012. And the people who bought it are not the most welcoming, I'll just say. You think they would know what they were buying, I guess, but
well, they had to have known.
Yes, they knew it, but I think they didn't really understand the power of how many people come to that house every single day.
Yeah.
And so when I was talking to her, and she was just telling me all these fun stories about how they filmed for about 7 months in the house, and they lived upstairs while this was all going on. And she said Macaulay Culkin used to have his tutoring in her bedroom. And also her one memory that she has was that every day after school there was this big table in the back with all these desserts and candy and Skittles and M&Ms, and she would sit there, and when she got home from school, she'd instantly go to that table, grab everything, and then just go up to her room. And that was like a routine. And of course, a 7-year-old, that's the thing she remembers. And so she's the one who told me about how in the backyard they dug, because when I went in the backyard when I was filming there, I saw it was so different. I just assumed that they had done construction and it's changed after all these years. But she was like, no, they actually built that staircase to the basement, and they built the tree house, and they kind of just really constructed the backyard. And then of course when they were done, they filled it back up and just kind of resumed it back to normal. And the one story she told me that you might find interesting is that on the last day of production, they asked her father, "Do you want to keep this treehouse?"
Oh,
and
yeah.
She of course was saying to her dad, "Please, please," because they built this really cool treehouse there. And the father, who I guess had some insight, a very intelligent man, he said, if this movie becomes really big, I don't want people coming into my backyard and climbing up into the treehouse, because if they fall and get hurt, I'm responsible. And so he said to tear it down.
Oh, the practicality. Doggone it.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's always the big thing when I saw so many people on the street. They were saying, like, is the treehouse back there? I wonder if the treehouse is back there. And the thing is, when you're ever film crawling, never trespass on people's property. I know how tempting it is, but it's like, when I got to go back there, I got permission to do that and said it would only be back here for like 5 minutes. And the whole point of also making the video is because I wanted to at least curb the curiosity of a lot of the viewers, so it would encourage them not to go back there.
So that's the angle you used? You just knocked on the door and said, "Hey, I'm making this video. If you let me back in your backyard, I can dissuade people from wanting to go there"?
Yeah, well, what happened was, the crazy thing is when you go there, when you visit, it is like, I kid you not, car after car after car after car after car. I mean, it's like a big, if everyone just kind of going there and taking that same photo with holding their face and with their mouth open. And what happened is I just happened to see them when they were coming home, and asked them kindly if I can. And it was at a time when there was no one there, like a rare moment where there was a lull.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the timing just kind of worked out well for that. Because if there was a bunch of people, I would never have asked them, because then it's like you'd kind of get the first popcorn kernel going, and then they all would just start going back there.
That's right. I was in San Francisco last month, and my family and I visited the Full House. And I think,
nice.
I think fans of that show got really lucky that Jeff Franklin bought the home, because even the gate was open and you were totally allowed to go and sit on the steps and take pictures and all of that. So that was a pretty cool moment.
He bought that not too long ago. He didn't always own it.
No, like a year ago. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so
here's some funny thing with Jeff Franklin. Do you know where Jeff Franklin lives now?
No.
He lives in the Sharon Tate murder house.
No way.
Yeah, well, he bought that house
creepy.
and tore it down and built a new house on that property, but he lives in the property that's on that property.
Wow.
Yeah, just not many people realize that he's a notably very, very wealthy man with Full House and Fuller House, and I think he's done, and all those other shows that he did. I think, wasn't he with Family Matters, or he was?
Yep. A lot of those TGIF shows.
Yeah, he was. So he did very well with his money, but yeah, he lives in the Tate murder house, if you want to call it that. I put house in quotes
because it's not there.
It's not there anymore. But I was kind of surprised when I heard that it was him who actually lived there.
Now, did you see the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
I have not yet, but I want to see it really bad. And I also saw when they were filming around here, because it was such a trip, because in Los Angeles they were, I mean, you probably saw online and everything that they were transforming areas into like the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
So areas like Westwood or certain streets in Hollywood, they just completely revamped it for a day and just put all these old like advertisements and storefronts, and it was really cool to see.
The movie was really, really well done, but it was about 2 hours into the movie. My father-in-law looks over and he goes, "I still don't know where this is going." And I'm like, "That is a Tarantino film for you." But
yeah,
around
you gotta buckle up for those movies
for sure. Around 2 hours and 35 minutes out of the 2 hours and 50-minute movie, that's when it got awesome. And you're like, wow, they pulled everything together. The end is amazing. It really makes the movie. Yeah,
because I'm imagining they have to address the Tate murder.
Right.
So that has to be addressed in the movie. So I would guess that's probably somewhere near the end. I'm probably, as far as the story goes.
Yeah, I'm not going to give it away, but he did a great job on that film. And I don't like every Tarantino film.
Here's a spoiler: she gets murdered.
Actually, here's a spoiler. Maybe not.
Interesting.
I'm not going to say.
Kind of like I don't know if you guys ever saw. There was a show called 11/22/63.
Yes, I saw that. That's the JFK about the guy who goes back to try and stop the assassination.
Exactly. It was a Stephen King book, and it's a 8-part miniseries with James Franco. And it is, I mean, if you like time travel movies and you're kind of fascinated with the Kennedy assassination, it is amazing. It's like the whole thing is there's this kind of like portal that he goes through where from the present time where when you go through this closet, it takes you to like one period, like in 1960. Like, and so he has to go there and stay there for 3 years and try to prevent the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Because if he goes back in the thing, he kind of he basically goes back to the present time. But then if he goes back in there, it kind of erases everything again, and it's like it starts back up at that 1960 point.
Yeah, that was a awesomely done show.
Yeah, so not many people know about that show for some reason, but it's like it's a good one if you care about those type of things.
Yeah, I bought it at Best Buy. And highly recommend that show because the end has a huge payoff, just like the Tarantino movie.
And if you read the book, which is like a Bible, I mean, I read the book before I saw the movie, and it was a really long book, and it does like it has kind of that's why it was an 8 episode miniseries because there was so much information, and there's so much that wasn't covered that they covered in the book. But it's definitely that 8th episode is the one where all the really cool payoffs happen.
Brian, you mentioned at the beginning of this show that you had a lot of childhood friends that were in the business growing up. And you were on, obviously, that game show, but had you appeared on any shows or were you in the business growing up?
There was a period where I was kind of acting a little bit. I mean, I like to tell people I wasn't a former child actor. I was a former child auditioner.
Okay.
Because it was about 2 years. I had an agent, and I was trying to pursue the business. I was about 11 or 12, and the problem that I had is I'm kind of tall, and I was pretty tall as a kid, and I had this big growth spurt, and I had a baby face, and I was tall, and that's a really bad formula for
it's hard
like
to cast
acting.
you younger, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's like, and they so I kind of, got a lot of callbacks, but I never quite got there. So it's so it didn't really work out too much. I actually I was in an episode of In Living Color once. That that the funny thing is I was in an episode of it that they never aired.
No.
So it's like I got all excited that I was in this episode that I got cast for, got to go through the whole process. It was something where David Allen Greer was playing this pimp named Silky, and it was kind of like if you remember Homie the Clown that Damon Wayans did. It was kind of a similar one where this character was also just being kind of rude to children and rude to his I guess his hookers or his whatever the women who worked with him, and it was really funny. And that character, a couple of the sketches aired, but the one that I was on never aired. So it's like I'm keep trying to buy all the DVDs
just to see if
maybe
you can find it.
Someday I can see it.
Man, that's a bummer. So,
but hey, I got a credit for it, so I'll take that.
I guess people make fun of people who name drop and that kind of thing. But are there any stars that were your friends that we would know?
I mean, a lot of them, just like when you were kind of in that scene when I was acting for a couple years, like you kind of would see a lot of them at auditions and whatnot. And one girl I was pretty good friends with was a girl named Angela Watson who was on Step by Step.
Step by Step, yeah.
Yeah, she played the dark-haired girl, and
Karen.
And through her, I'm friends with Christine Lakin, who I'm still friends with today. And so a lot of people I would see a lot. Zachary Ty Bryan, who was in Home Improvement, and then just people I've kind of met throughout the years. Like we kind of have like it's kind of like a little fraternity. Like we kind of knew the same people, and that's what's really been kind of fun about social media. How it's really connected us with these actors from our childhood. Because even if you've never met them, which I'm sure you probably deal with a lot, where you really feel like you kind of grew up with them. You have like a dynamic with them as if they were a childhood friend.
Absolutely. That's why I was so enthralled with seeing this Home Alone thing come to life, as well as some of these movies that you've recreated the posters for. I'm like, these were the movies in the 90s that we were watching.
Yeah.
And that's when I grew up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's one thing I kind of wanted to point out, because when I listened to your show and I noticed that you guys talk a lot with former child actors or child acting, and it's been touched upon a little bit, but there's something that I think a lot of people don't realize when it's kind of like one of those myth type things where people just kind of think when you're a child actor that all of a sudden there's that period, you go through puberty and you can't get any work. And that's and your career like stops. And the reason why it stops is because they're not cute anymore and they're ugly or whatever you want to say. And there's a real scientific business reason for what happens. And I think that a lot of people don't realize kind of how there's such a big difference between child acting and adult acting. And I mean, I could kind of break down one thing if you don't mind, just to kind of
love that.
at least share.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, because what happens is, like, I always think of a child actor's career as like a wave, and where they'll kind of get, if you're lucky enough to get that one little break, you kind of will act a lot for about a couple of years. And it's like, because when you get hot, they kind of continue casting you, and a lot of the roles that are offered for kids are very generic. It's kind of like you're playing either a version of yourself or just like a bully or a jock or something kind of like that. There's only those handful of roles where you get a really juicy piece of acting from a kid, like those Dakota Fanning roles or Haley Joel Osment or, some of those performances that there's just far and few between.
Right.
And because, most of the time you're going to be cast because you look like you could be the child of Robin Williams and Sally Field. So it's so what happens then is, so you're working a lot as a kid, and when you hit about 12 or 13, and all of a sudden you're going to be now considered for those teen roles, pretty much anyone between 13 and 17, those roles are going to be going to an 18 and over person. And that's just when I say almost 100%. And unless you're one of those actors like the Dakota Fannings or even Lindsay Lohan at that time, and the big reason is because it's a financial thing where if they're casting you at 13, 14, 15, they're completely limited in how much they can work you.
That's right.
And they have to hire a guardian and a tutor on set, which is expensive, and then also they can only use you for a certain amount of hours, versus they hire an 18-year-old who looks 13, which there are plenty of, and they'll hire them and they can kind of work them to death. So it's one of those things where when someone's career stalls at that moment, I mean, it happened to Ron Howard, which people don't realize, that after Andy Griffith, he didn't work really until he hit 18 and got Happy Days. So even someone like him had that kind of that lull, and it's really it happens to a lot of people. And then when you come back when you're 18 and over, you're now an adult actor, and now you're going to be kind of judged for your acting ability, versus where you were just someone who was outgoing and animated. It's just different. My point is that it's just a very different dichotomy for child acting and adult acting. And it always kind of, when I speak with former child actors, they say that, a lot of people always kind of ask them the famous question, like, oh, so why'd you stop acting? And I've always been I've learned not to ever ask them that, because I always think it's like asking a woman in her 40s, so how come you don't have kids?
It might not be by choice. You're right.
Yeah, well, I mean, where it's kind of like you're asking a question that you kind of know probably the answer, and it's like, if you ever even watch any interviews and you see, like, when someone asks them that, it's just so uncomfortable. It's like they have to kind of come up with, I wanted to go back to school and focus on my studies, and it's like, I'm sitting there, like, cringing internally, like, oh, man, like, it's like, don't ask them this. And
what a terrible time in life to hit a lull, those awkward teenage years to begin with. And now nobody will hire you after you've been, starring on a series or guest starring and that kind of thing. Terrible time.
Yeah, television, when you're on a TV show, that's really the only time you can kind of sustain that period when you're working, because you're already kind of used to that. But the thing is, the thing, they don't really know that that's really the reason why that happens. Like, it has nothing to do with them. It's just that it's just a lot more convenient to hire someone older. And as you were saying, it's a real awkward time for them anyways, and it just really kind of messes with your head. And that's why a lot of them, are left to feel like, it's kind of like if you're in school and you're getting all A's, and then you're acting the same way, and then you hit 8th grade and you're all of a sudden now getting F's. Mm-hmm. And nothing has changed at all with you. You're still working really hard, you're still studying, and you're just getting F's, and you can't get by those F's, and it's like you're made to think, obviously, there must be something wrong with me. I mean, I hope I wasn't boring you too much. Just kind of wanted to at least bring to light, an issue that a lot of people don't realize, and at least it can help understand.
I've always
why
been
that happened.
fascinated, probably because when I was a kid, I maybe wanted to be one of those child stars so bad. So I'm really fascinated with hearing those stories about what it was like growing up, being famous, being in a movie or being on TV. And probably why we get a lot of those guests, because those are the people I'm trying to track down. So.
Yeah, I know the two of us have talked about Kalina Kiff a lot. That's another person I grew up with as well. I know that it's funny because not many people really know who she is, and I just thought it was kind of, amazing that you did.
Well,
And
yeah, I mean, you Leave It to Beaver.
Anybody who knew who she was, that means they had a crush on her.
Absolutely. We've tried to get her on the show a couple of times, and people have reached out, but we have not been successful. But we're going to keep trying.
Yeah, and I mean, I haven't spoken with her in a bit, but I mean, I have that on my mind when I do talk to her. I mean, every once in a while, we speak, and she's she kind of keeps a low profile on the child acting stuff, even though she's proud of it, of course. But it's just that she lives in Canada now, and she's a producer, director, and she's got little films she's trying to make. And I think, sometimes people just kind of like having a little bit of privacy, I guess, when it comes to certain things. But then it's like when it's their time, they'll come out.
And I think that's going to happen for her because she, like I did notice that too, that she's making films and producing them. She's going to want to talk about them at some point.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. Well, even going back to Soleil, I mean, when I was trying to work her out, she is very selective of what she does with Punky. Like, I mean, because if you look on her Instagram and everything, she does pay homage to it, but it's everything it's on her terms. And I was kind of warned of that ahead of time. So it's like you won't really see her, like she'll whip out the Punky card when she wants to. But it's like if you approach her with a Punky idea, she's not going to say yes to that for sure.
Yeah.
And if I was going to guess, this whole new Punky reboot had to be her idea.
Well, I hope that happens. I would.
Yeah, I mean, it should be fun. I mean, hopefully she won't look ridiculous getting back in the outfit. But I mean, I think it's probably
I don't think she'll be back in the outfit.
Yeah, she's not going to be going Punky power. I mean,
No.
I think if anything, it's probably going to be her as a producer, maybe with a new Punky or something kind of like. It sounds like it's more of a reboot, like a rehashing type thing, not like a continuation.
Right. No, I'm
Like
sure it'll be some Fuller House type situation where she's going to adopt a kid or something.
Yeah, well, see, that would be cool if it's that case, but I think it's going to be more of just like more of a remake reboot.
Oh.
More kind of like where there'll be just a new Punky and a new, even though I kind of like when they start doing these things. I don't know, are you watching 90210?
No.
Well, you know what? I would advise you to watch the first episode and see what you think. It's very interesting.
Okay. I'll at least do that, and I'll report on it.
Okay, if you like the show, it's just kind of an interesting kind of take that they do because they kind of are playing heightened versions of themselves, and I just think that kind of concept is interesting.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I watched 90210 when it was on, so I'll see. For some reason,
it's one of those things. Yeah, so they're playing kind of like themselves, but these somewhat fictionalized, heightened versions of themselves.
Yeah, I knew it was coming, and I was like, it just didn't get me excited to turn it on, but I'll check it out.
Yeah, just for the sake of being that you want to be educated on pop culture for research purposes.
Exactly, that's what I'll blame it on.
Yeah, exactly. Or you just blame it on me. Be like, if you're watching it and your wife's like, what's going on? You're like, oh, Brian told me to watch it.
I made a promise to somebody. Brian, I want to thank you so much for joining me. Before I let you go, I want you to tell me one more story that you mentioned to me about one of the film crawls that you've got coming up regarding the movie My Girl, which we talked about with Anna. How do you say her last name? Is that Chlumsky? Chlumsky and Macaulay Culkin. So you tracked down the tree from that movie, and it's a little bit of an interesting story from what I am told. Yeah.
Well, most of filming locations in general, you can Google and they'll kind of tell you where things are shot, and most of it is more just it'll kind of give you the end place where you want to go. And for the My Girl tree, that is a very unique location because it's on private property and it's not listed online. Now, I mean, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but if you kind of look online, it'll say that it was filmed at some place called Mirror Lake or something in Tampa. And whatever it is, whether that was intentional or an accident when production put out those locations, that's not where it is. So it's not. So it's like so you have to kind of find it on your own. And at least I kind of had a little bit of an insight. A buddy of mine who, a YouTuber named Adam the Woo, is a big popular filming locations junkie who kind of tracks down a lot of things, and he found the location and wouldn't tell me where it was, but he kind of told me how he found it. So he kind of said like that he knew that it was on private property near a lake, somewhere kind of in that Florida little area. And me being the naive Los Angeles guy, I'm thinking, oh, in LA there's like 2 lakes here. It's like it should be pretty easy to kind of track this down. And when I kind of went over to Google Earth over there in like the Tampa area over there, the Tampa, Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, there's hundreds of lakes. So I kind of was going on Google Earth and zooming down to see if I can hopefully see kind of the tree. And the thing for you to know here is the tree in My Girl wasn't a real weeping willow, because what they did there, you got to know the tree I'm talking about, the one where they had that kiss. And so they basically took this tree and it was an oak tree, I think, and they transported it to this, just the roots of it or the base of it, and they put it up against this lake, and they dressed it, because this was before CGI or anything. They actually sat there and dressed it with all these leaves and these kind of fake like branches, and they made this artificial tree. You can kind of see online, there's photos of them, at least still photos of them creating it. And then when production was done, they took all of it down and left, and these people who own this property have literally not touched it.
Are you telling me that this thing is like a big tree stump of sticks?
It's this is from what I heard. It's like, it's up there. It's, if you can imagine, when you hear about an abandoned location, it was just like the same owners own this big piece of property, and I think they're on the older side, and they just, they filmed it, and then they just kind of left it there, and it's a lot of weeds have grown over it, and it's this big kind of, it's not really a stump, it's more of just like this, looks like a skeleton of a tree. And so I was looking for what the skeleton looks like, and also that pier that they ran off is now like collapsed. Like, it was just like they just really didn't keep it up in the last 25 years. So I was searching there because I knew I was going to Orlando for about 3 days, and I kind of figured I'm going to give this a shot, and I'm going to see if I can maybe find it. And I spent about a week, I kid you not, like sitting there zooming and then zooming out, and I kind of got on a plane and headed to Orlando with 3 potential spots. Like, I had 3 addresses, thinking that maybe one of them might be it. Because when you're looking at Google Earth and you're zooming down at like a property that's like a lake, it's not very accurate.
Right.
So I had kind of one shot, and I drove to this one place that I thought was probably it, and I drove up to the front, and there was this old lady sitting on front, probably like in her late 80s or so, and I got out of my car, and I was like, excuse me. She's like, can I help you? And I'm like, hate to bother you, but by any chance, did they film a movie on your property like many years ago? And she goes, My Girl? And I was like, oh my God. Like, I found it.
Yeah.
And I said to her, I was like, would you mind, I mean, I hate to, be on your property, but would you mind if I went back with a buddy of mine, if I went back there just for like a little bit, just to take a look at it? And she's like, oh, sure. Just don't let the cows out, and make sure you look out for the alligators and snakes.
Oh, wonderful.
And I was like, what? So anyways, I went back there, and I kind of walked through like this real dilapidated backyard. There were all these cows, and luckily no snakes or alligators, but lo and behold, I walked back there and saw this tree, and it was like this skeleton of a tree, and on the tree you could see rusted screws. So it's like, it was just such a beautiful, peaceful place to just be standing there and looking around. And see, I was a big My Girl fan, so it's like to be able to look around and kind of just, you hear all the silence, and it was just very emotional and really amazing. And the thing that also was a little annoying, kind of a similar Punky Brewster thing, is, of course, afterwards I spoke with her and I said, if I brought Anna and Macaulay back here, would you allow them to come back here? And she said, yeah, sure. And she gave me her number. So I was thinking, here, I got a cool little thing. And they've never, they actually haven't reunited with one another since filming, for whatever reason it is. Like one of the few people who've not been reunited. And so I reached out to both of them separately, and they both said no.
Well, that's too bad.
And I'm sitting there thinking, like, how can you both not want to come? I mean, this was like so cool for me, and I can imagine for you it would be just so amazing. And like, and the thing with Anna, I mean, to be honest, this is another Soleil thing, is I really don't think her manager gave her the message.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like, but but Macaulay is a man who walks to a beat of marches to a beat of his own drum,
For sure.
and he just he's out there. He kind of will does his podcast and does a lot of videos here and there. But he's very cool from what I've heard. I've actually never met him, but he just will at least just pick and choose what he does. And I think at least right now he's not that interested in that. And then I know for a fact that he got the message, but he just right now wasn't too interested or whatnot. But it's that tree is not going to be there too long, but it's still a really fun experience to track that down. And I'm just going to post a video sometime soon about that kind of that journey, which would be kind of have a fun little video there and showing what it looks like today.
That's awesome. So your YouTube channel you've got a couple of them, right? You've got 22 Vision.
Yeah. 22 Vision is the main one where I upload those videos. So the other one is kind of just a little fun one that I kind of play with, but at least that one is kind of the one where most of everything's going to pop up.
Excellent. You can go to 22vision.com and get the links to all of Brian's social media platforms, and you can see something we didn't talk about also, but it was the Kids of Horror, which real quick you brought together the girls from Raising Hope, and you dressed them up in the iconic scary movies of the past, so you can see that photo gallery there, as well as The Little Rascals, School of Rock, and Problem Child. They're all there at 22vision.com. Do you have another place where you want people to check out social media?
For now, just probably there. I've got a Facebook page, 22 Vision, where a lot of the galleries also reside. So try to beef things up as this year goes by with some cool videos that are coming. So, but I think probably the YouTube channel is the primary place. I'll try to make announcements there.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us, Brian. I really do appreciate it. Your stories were great.
Okay, no problem. And I'm always here to help you guys out too for any future things that if you ever need a consultant on something or even privately want to try to get somebody, it's always worth reaching out to me. And you never know. If I know them, then I'll be happy to send them your way.
My thanks to Brian Pocrass for joining me last minute here on the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. Very happy to have him here, and I do appreciate his time. Now, you can follow us on social media. I encourage you to do so. I told you at the top of the show how to do that, so I won't go over that again. But what I do want to ask you to do is share our show with your friends. Tell them about the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. And we would very much encourage new listeners to join us. We've got so many great episodes coming up. I've got a big plan for next week. I hope it comes through. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed with a very special guest. We just have to make sure everything works out. So I don't want to spoil it because I don't want to jinx myself, but I do have my fingers crossed that episode 100 is going to be epic. So come back next week. Find out who our guest is going to be for our 100th episode. Thanks for joining us on the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.